This message is for every single person age 12 and up in the room today, watching online. You need to consider everything I say about finding the right person to be in a relationship with. I told the boys backstage a while ago that this sermon is, I've been working on this one for 38 years. True story. I've preached portions of this sermon and tweaked over the years. My kids grew up listening to me talk about these principles. And here's what I'll say to kind of start and set the tone. Sometimes God's trying to move the wrong person out of your life so he can move the right person into your life. And you don't even realize it, and you're fighting to hold on to the wrong person. Now, if you're married, settle down. I ain't talking to you. You're going, oh my God, he's going to give me permission. No. You need to fix it. You need to work it out, see a good counselor. But before I get into the meat of this message, let me say this, especially to all the singles. When you refuse to acknowledge God's action and involvement in your life, and you're determined to pursue your own way, there is always a high price to pay. Always. So please listen. So let's jump right in. When it comes to marriage, the book of Proverbs is extremely straightforward. The writer's basically screaming in the face of people headed toward the wedding altar. And I can sum up the wisdom of the book of Proverbs in 4 words. Don't screw this up. Yeah. That's a Hebrew expression that I've modernized just a little bit. I think the writer of Proverbs would say in this regard, shank a golf shot, run over the mailbox, pulling out of the driveway, burn the Thanksgiving turkey. But don't make a mistake when you're choosing someone to spend the rest of your life with. You don't know hurt and brokenness and pain until you know marital disharmony and discord. Proverbs 15:17 says, better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fattened calf with hatred. Let me translate wise King Solomon's words into a modern vernacular today. He says, it would be better to only have a bowl of vegetables where there is love than juicy steaks where there is hate. Right? We can stretch this out a little further. It's better to be poor in a home where there is love than rich in a home where there is hate. The writer of Proverbs says marriage is for keeps. Make sure you wind up with the right one. Some of you have probably read in Proverbs about the roof, the attic, and the desert. Have you read those? Let me refresh your memory. Better to live on a corner of a roof than to share a home with a quarreling wife. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. Than a quarreling spouse. You're very welcome. Because in 38 years, I've found out this road runs both ways. Absolutely does. Proverbs 21:9, better to live in the corner of the attic than to live in the home with a quarreling spouse. And upon further reflection, he goes another step further. He says, better to live in the middle of the desert than with a quarreling, angry spouse. The comprehensive understanding of these 3 proverbs, you'd be pretty much better off anywhere than in a binding relationship with the wrong person. Now, so the question is, how can this kind of pain be avoided? Or turning it around, how can single people wind up with a lifelong partner that's going to result in love and intimacy and happiness instead of loneliness, disillusionment, and heartbreak? Now, a few years ago, I read a phenomenal book called Finding the Love of Your Life by Neil Warren. Now, Neil, some of you probably recognize his name. He's a Christian psychologist. He's an author, and he's the founder of eHarmony. And while I don't agree with all of his theology because I think he kind of caved to a culture that was putting demands on him, and I didn't agree with all that, I do agree with his assessment of errors that contribute to badly matched marriage partners. So I want to walk you through these things. I'm going to give you 4 of the top 5 that he gave. Number 1, he said the decision to marry is made too soon. The decision to marry is made too soon. Neil cites a Kansas State University study that establishes a strong correlation between long courtships and satisfying marriages, and as you might suspect, an equally strong correlation between short courtships and heartbreaking marriages. Now listen to me, guys. You have everything to gain and almost nothing to lose by going slowly in a developing relationship. Every month that you extend your courtship will either affirm the health of the relationship or begin to erode the confidence that you have in it. Either way, it's a win for you, okay? Longer engagements help you gain enormous security as you're headed toward marriage. Or you find out those sticking points that's got to have attention before, on this side of the altar, before you get to the other side of spending the rest of your life together. Those things that have to be fixed before saying I do. Now, as ludicrous as it sounds to starry-eyed lovers, I've always maintained from the point where your relationships get serious, you ought to be thinking in minimum terms of 1 year of dating before walking down the aisle to get married, okay? Just giving you statistical information and what works best. Even better would be 2 years like Sylvia and I had before we got married. Of course, I was 14 when we met. That's not true. I was 16. There's so much that needs to be known, and the stakes are so increasingly high. So go slowly. Don't make that marriage decision too quickly. Never trade your deadline for God's timing. Just don't do it. Wait on the Lord. Now, I was 18 when we got married. She was 20. And she will tell you, as I will, that getting married that young was a challenge. Because until after 25 years of age, those years were the worst of our married life. We struggled the most. We were still becoming the people that God created us to be. We were changing in the same house, and it didn't always work well. We survived, but that's all we did. We didn't thrive, we just survived. So I'm speaking from experience and telling you, it was the grace of God that we got through it until after the age of 25. Only God made it happen. The second mistake often made in the marriage process, again, and I'm going to elaborate a little further, is the decision is made at too young an age. Why don't we let 3-year-olds play with knives? Why don't we let 8-year-olds drive cars? Why don't we let 12-year-olds make public policy? Because developmentally, they're just not capable of stewarding those responsibilities wisely. Would you agree with that? Psychological development experts now know that very few human beings are fully formed and mature until age 25. Very few. Most people younger than that are still doing intense identification work, which is asking and answering the question, who am I really? Who am I separate from my parents when they're no longer around? How do I gain autonomy from my parents and begin to lead my own life? People under 25 are usually still doing core values work. What do I believe? What am I going to stake my life on? And do I have the guts to live according to my convictions? People under 25 are often still doing a core competency work. What am I good at? What kind of career am I going to have? Most people under the age of 25 are still doing spiritual formation work. Do I believe in God? Do I believe that Jesus Christ is who He said He was? Do I believe it enough to arrange my whole life around those truths? With all of that work going on, all of that maturity and evolving going on, to make a decision as important as mate selection during this critical era is almost too much to ask. How much better to wait until the formation process is more complete? Usually after the age of 25. Now, I used to complain to Micah and Marissa about waiting so long to have babies. I'd say, I'm getting old. I should have said, your mama's getting old. But I'd say, I'm getting old, and I want to be around to watch my grandkids graduate from high school and college, and I want to be the one like my dad did with his grandchildren to give them their first car. And Marissa had the audacity to get in my face and say, hold on a minute. Daddy, you're the one that taught us not to marry before age 25. So we waited. This is your fault. True story. Did you say that to me, Riss? You did. You should know that statistically now divorce rates are lowest for men and women who wait until they're 28 years or older to marry. The highest divorce rates would be among those people who marry in their teenage years or in their early 20s. So go slowly and give yourself some time to grow up first. Become who God created you to be before settling down. The third mistake, according to Neil, in marriage selection process is one or both parties are too eager to get married. Now, you know some people get marriage fever. They just do. We've all seen this happen. It happened to some of you. It sweeps over them. People don't even know why. It just sweeps over them. Marriage, they think, will end my loneliness. It'll heal my brokenness. It'll ensure my happiness. And some people look at the trouble, the struggles, the deficits in their lives and convince themselves that marriage will make all of that stuff disappear. Listen, nothing could be further from the truth. Okay? If you're chronically an unhappy single person, a walk down the aisle is not going to solve those issues for you. It might also add to the problems. It might compound them, but it will not solve them. Fix you first. Spend some time fixing you and becoming who God created you to be. The fourth mistake people make in regard to marriage is many couples make the mistake of unrealistic expectations in marriage. She was raised in a home where the family always sat at the dinner table together every night for supper. He was raised in a home where his father often called at the end of the workday and said, I'm not going to be home for supper tonight. Going to go grab a few beers with the fellas at work after work. She was raised in a home with a very strict budget. He was raised in a home that lived from paycheck to paycheck. If you have extra, spend it. He wants to get married because the idea of sex on demand sends chills up his spine. She could live with it or without it and prefers in-depth conversations and long walks in the park. Listen, this is why half of all marriages today are ending in divorce. There's issues. Couples have to talk about this stuff ahead of time. She wants a herd of kids. He doesn't want any. And then they don't talk about it until after they get married. That's a problem. You with me? These are big issues, and a lot of times people don't talk about this stuff until after there's a lot of heat in the relationship and a lot of pressure. And then the talks don't go so well. So that's four of the most frequently made mistakes, according to Neil Warren in his classic book, Finding the Love of Your Life. Now, with the time that remains, I want to move to the positive side of the dating process and tell you what the researchers say is most likely to make a relationship work for the long haul. They say it in one word: similarity. Similarity, no kidding. How many times have you heard the old romantic saying, opposites attract? You ever heard that? I think we've all heard that one before. However, most research is now telling us that marriages based on the attraction of opposites are usually in for serious trouble that they aren't prepared to handle. In fact, this can be a marriage killer after the new wears off and real life settles in around the relationship. Before marriage, opposites attract. After marriage, opposites attack. The newest research on healthy marriages generally agrees that the higher the degree of core similarities in a relationship, the greater the likelihood that the marriage is going to last over the long haul. With this in mind, let me offer you four profoundly important areas of compatibility that should be in place before couples walk the wedding aisle. Number one is right at the top of the list. I'm going to call it spiritual compatibility. Now, I want to be clear on this one because people always push back, and I've been teaching this for 38 years. The Bible has some strong teaching on this, and it's called the principle of being equally yoked. Okay? Paraphrase, the Bible says if you're a person who has no interest in spiritual things, then find someone who shares your lack of spiritual interest. Because then you'll be equally yoked together as unbelievers. Neither of you gives a rip about spiritual things, so you'll do just fine in that area until Judgment Day. Then you're screwed, okay? But you'll have a good, happy life not believing in God together until the day you die. Then it says if you're really fired up about God and you're going that way with your life, you better find someone who feels the same way you do about God, because then you'll be equally yoked. Now, here's where the trouble comes in, okay? The Apostle Paul says to Christians in 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be bound together with an unbeliever. And when Christian singles hear this, they get really irritated. And why? Why would he say that? First, it drastically, they're upset because it drastically reduces the number of possible marriage candidates, right? Many Christian singles believe this kind of teaching is restrictive by God, or God's being vindictive somehow. They're like, whoa, was God having a bad day? I happen to like this person who's not a Christian, so why would the Bible tell me that I can't be with them, that I shouldn't be with them? But when thoughtful people reflect on this instruction from God, they begin to understand the reasoning behind it. If, as the research suggests, marriages tend to be much more satisfying among those who share deep commonalities, then I'm going to ask you this question. What is deeper than a person's spirituality? What's deeper than that? If you and your partner don't share a mutual love for line dancing, no big deal. You can probably get past it. If you don't both love the Carolina Panthers, you can probably work that out. Or you don't both love to go to sushi bars, no big deal. That's one thing. You can probably get past all of that if the other things in the relationship are good. Y'all tracking? But when God is at the center of your life, are you listening? When God is at the center of your life, when pleasing, honoring, and serving Him, when proclaiming His goodness and love is foundational to who you are, when that is not shared in a relationship, in a marriage, it's going to be incredibly difficult to get past, and you're going to deal with that tension for the rest of your life. I've been a senior pastor for 38 years now. During that time, I cannot tell you the number of broken-hearted men and women, mostly women, who sit in church without their spouse in tears because their spouse doesn't love God like they do. Listen, when you're bound together in marriage to an unbeliever, you don't pray together at the end of a Sunday service or with your kids before you eat your meals or before you put them down for bed. You don't go to small group together to grow in a Christian community. When God speaks to your heart to help an outreach ministry or to donate a little extra at church, you always have to consider the fact that your unbelieving spouse may not approve and is likely going to push back, and there's going to be a problem at home. There's going to be tension. I've heard that story or versions of it hundreds of times in 38 years. One year I preached this sermon. We were over on, I guess it's called Hope Mills Road, where the YMCA was at. Main Street. And I preached this thought, this idea of being equally yoked. And there was a lady that came up to me after service, and she said, Pastor, I come to church alone every single week. My husband wants nothing to do with God and is perturbed that I'm a part of this church. For years, I put my kids in bed every night, and I prayed with them, and my husband would walk by and said he would laugh and make fun of my prayers. Think of the dissension in that home. She's praying with her kids, and the husband's laughing at her. Listen, a partner from God pushes you to your breakthrough, not your breaking point. It's just they're going to complement that. Some years ago, I had a young lady on my staff who loved the Lord with her whole heart, and she married a man who would not surrender his life to God. She heard me preach this point. She came to me after the message, and she said, Pastor, if I'd have heard this teaching 35 years ago, it would have saved me from a lifetime of heartache and pain. She said, now I'm begging God to save my husband and heal our home. Now listen, if you're in the room or you're watching online and you're married to an unbeliever and you've never heard this teaching before, and now you're going, okay, what do I do? You do the same thing that she was doing. You pray for their salvation. You never give up on it. You let your life be a living testimony to the power of God through His redemption. It won't be easy, but don't you ever give up on your spouse's salvation. You hold on and you believe God and you trust God and you ask God to let your life be a living testimony in front of that spouse. Can I get an amen or a hallelujah on that? But to the single people in the room and watching online, please hear me. Stop dating people that you have to step away from God to be with. Second time I've said that in this series. Stop trying to invite God into a relationship He asked you to stay out of. You can build a relationship with someone with whom you share the deepest treasure of life, or you can live separate lives, never being completely compatible spiritually. It's your call. I mean, you're going to do what you're going to do, but please remember this. The right relationship will never distract you from God. It will bring you closer to Him. The second essential compatibility is this: emotional health compatibility. Again, let me say it because I feel the tension in the room. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. I counsel people all the time with this issue, okay? And people just go into relationships so blindly. And they don't even see when God's trying to help them. They get mad at God for trying to move things and move people out and move other people in. What I'm referring to here when I say emotional health compatibility is being confident that your future together will not be imperiled by secrets and complications from the past. Let me explain and unpack that a bit. I'm going to be painfully direct because I have not been so far in this sermon. I thought I'd try it and see how it worked. Thank you. That special person in your life that you're thinking about marrying, the one whose hand you hold walking in public places, the one who looks so sexy and irresistible in candlelight, that person grew up in an imperfect family with imperfect parents, with depraved siblings, with probably a few unstable relatives. Most families have a few authentically crazy relatives, and if you don't know who they are, it's probably you. You can bet the heartthrob or the beautiful bombshell sitting across the restaurant table didn't end up in front of you without taking some hits along life's path. The question is, do you know what kind of hits they took? Do you know how much damage was done? Do you know whether they're getting better these days or sinking into an emotional oblivion? I asked permission. I rarely ask permission to tell stories like this, but I asked Marissa's permission this morning to tell the story. She goes, "You're asking this morning, you've already got it in your notes." She went to UNCP, Pembroke, and she met this guy, this jerk of a guy, that I threatened to kill. And I'll tell you why. She doesn't like for me to talk about this, and she wants to put it behind her and forget it, and here I am using it as a sermon illustration. But what... I got nothing. Let me tell you about this dude. If I told him, and I had a conversation with him in my office at the house at the time, and I called him in and I told him, I said, some basic ground rules. You put your hands on my daughter in an inappropriate way, and I will hurt you. Things that fathers say while they're cleaning their shotgun. Right? Actually, my pistol was sitting on my desk while I was talking to him. True story. He didn't say a word. It was smart on his part. But if I told this dude to have her home at 10 p.m., he'd make sure it was midnight. If I told him, he didn't walk Marissa to the door. He never came in the house. He blowed his horn in the driveway. Things that just ticks a father off, really bad. He was disrespectful to her family, not just to me, but to her mother. He just constantly, and this boy was an intern youth pastor at another church. Absolute jerk, okay? He had no idea how to treat a lady. So it come to a head. I'll make a long story short for Marissa's benefit. It come to a head, and this was a bad moment, okay? He had done something that I won't talk about, and I had enough. This is my only daughter. And so I called Marissa in the room, and we're standing out there. It had all come to a head. I said, "Do you love this guy?" And she's like, I don't know if I love him or not. I don't know. I said, "Well, let me help you out." I said, "If you're going to continue to date this jerk," look, and I'd already told her mama what I was going to do, and I said, "She may walk out. She may leave and never come back." I was prepared for that. I said, "If you're going to continue to date this jerk and let him mistreat you and disrespect this house, our family," I said, "you need to go upstairs and pack everything that's yours, and that ain't much, and get out of my house, because I'm not going to watch it and allow it to happen under my roof." She's crying and bawling. In just a few moments, she walked out of the room, and I heard her on the phone. Don't you ever call me again? Don't you ever? You can't see me anymore. And then he said some hateful things back to me, and Micah gets on the phone and texts him and said, when I see you again, I'm going to kick your butt. It ain't going to be good for you. The dude checked out of college and went home. Because Micah went headhunting. I didn't authorize that. It's how it played out. And you know, somebody would say, PT, I think you overstepped as a father. Let me be clear. I couldn't care less what you think of me as a father. Not even a little bit. I have one daughter, and I said no because God clearly had a better yes. That was perfect, Josh. That was perfect. Dang. I was fighting for her future. When you're dating someone and major character flaws rise to the surface, I can promise you this. If they go unchecked, they don't get better after you get married. They get worse. If he doesn't treat you like a queen when you're dating, he certainly is not going to treat you like a queen after you're married. You guys remember the story of Samson and Delilah, right? Delilah pretended to be in love with Samson, but the truth was Samson's enemies sent her on mission to distract and destroy him. Samson was given clear red flag warnings, and he ignored every one of them. She did bad things to him, set him up over and over again, and he kept ignoring the signs like the signs didn't matter. Pay attention to the tension. Pay attention to the tension. You better do your homework. You need to know where the object of your affection is coming from and what background they're coming from. Let me say something about that. You need to check out the family of the person that you're infatuated with. I know what you're thinking, but I'm ready for you. 38 years I've been getting ready for this sermon. Oh, pastor, I'm not marrying her mama and daddy. I'm marrying her. If you believe that, you're dumb as dirt. Dumb as dirt. You're marrying the whole family. When you get her, you get all of them. When you finally get to the honeymoon and you shut the door to the honeymoon suite behind you and you lock the door, you haven't locked her mama and daddy out of that room. They're in there with you, my friend. You locked mom and daddy in. Let me tell you something. The love of your life has a big slice of her mother, her daddy, and siblings in her life, and they'll show up in her even though they're thousands of miles away. And if any of those had major dysfunctions that went unchecked, it's likely that mama's problems are going to surface in your marriage somewhere down the line. Daddy's attitude is going to pop up when you least expect it. You better pay attention to how her mama and daddy behave toward each other. You need to spend some time with mom and daddy before you get married. How they treat each other. How they interact through good times and bad times. How are they behaving? I'm a strong advocate for premarital counseling. If it looks like you're headed toward a wedding, it's time to say, all right, let's go to a Christian counselor and let's sit down and let's talk about our lives all the way from the cradle on. Let me unpack that a little bit. Talk about the most painful seasons of your life. I have a questionnaire that I give to couples that I'm going to marry, and man, it's intrusive. It talks about how many sexual partners you've had, who they are, list them all. You know why I make people do that now? Because I had a couple that was out to eat one night, and they sat at the table right beside a girl that he had been engaged to, and she didn't ever know this story. And the conversation got going, and she's picking up on things that he never told her, and it created major havoc in their relationship because he kept stuff from her. So I say handle it all on this side. And you know what? Major psychologists and counselors, especially in Christian circles, support me on this. And if you don't like it, you can be wrong about it. But I'm right on this. You need to talk about all of that stuff, okay, so that there's no hidden stories that can come back and bite you on the hiney later. You need to know who was the most important person in the one's life that you love. How did they treat you? What are the best memories? What are your worst memories? What are your scars? What are your wounds? What dinged you so badly that you thought you were never going to recuperate from it? You need to talk about that stuff. Talk through it all so that you have a basic understanding of what you're going to be working with for the rest of your life. Most people who go through premarital counseling come out of it a whole lot better conditioned to make their marriage and their relationship last a lifetime. Number 3, you're not ready for this one, and I've never heard another pastor talk about it, physical attraction. Never in my life have I heard another pastor preach on this one right here. It's like pastors are afraid to bring it up or they think they're going to get sued and it's illegal or something. What we're talking about here is sort of the octane rating, the magic factor that you feel in a relationship. One of the most powerful examples of a high magic factor comes not out of Shakespeare or out of Hollywood, but out of the Bible itself in the book of Genesis. A man named Jacob, he meets a woman named Rachel. And Jacob felt such a powerful attraction to Rachel that when he finally worked up the courage to kiss her the first time, the Bible said he broke down and wept. What a wuss. He cried. He kissed her. What the heck was that all about? He just had overwhelming feelings for her. Genesis 29, started around verse 11. Read it for yourself. My daddy, let me tell you this story. My daddy gave my wife a very hard time the first year that we dated. I was 16. Oh, I was 16. You were 18. Okay. I lied to her about my age, so she would not say no when I asked her out. So anyway, maybe I've never told y'all that part. This has not been a good sermon for me so far. When Sylvia finally came from Panama City to Sanford, Florida to see me, we didn't have social media back in those days, so my dad laid eyes on her, and this girl is absolutely stunning, okay? Gorgeous. And I'm telling you the truth. My daddy was so curious about her and so inquisitive that he was so concerned. My own daddy said this to me, and I'm just about quoting it word for word. He said, "What does a girl who looks like that want with a boy that looks like you?" And he didn't trust her. He thought she had some agenda. I'm like, "Daddy, what is she attracted to poor people? Is that what it is?" Let me tell you, I was picking at Jacob and how he did Rachel, but Sylvia and I, you've heard the story. I'm gonna make it abbreviated. We met at church camp in Lakeland, Florida, and I was up on stage. I had a girlfriend at that camp. She was cute. So I had a girlfriend at that camp, and I was sitting beside her, but I was playing bass guitar for the band. And so during the altar call that night, I'm up playing bass guitar. And Sylvia happened to be sitting right in front of my girlfriend. And I looked down to see my girlfriend, trying to be cool. And Sylvia's looking right at me. And everybody done been talking about this Panama City girl, And Sylvia, I'm looking at her, and she winked at me. I ain't kidding, boy. Look, let me tell you what happened. Y'all going to hate me for this. I put my guitar down. They didn't have a bass for the rest of that set. And I walked off the stage, come around. My girlfriend picked her purse up like I was going to sit down beside her. I sat down by Sylvia right in front of her. Oh, I know y'all hate me for that, but you can understand. I can understand why Jacob cried like a wuss. Because this pretty girl that I didn't think I had a shot with, all of a sudden she's flirting with me. I mean, for real. You went from cute to, oh my God. Just gorgeous. So everything changes, when you finally, that attraction needs to be there. It just has to be. Don't underestimate the importance of having this intense mutual physical attraction because it's important. It's always going to be important in the overall equation. And finally, number 4, character compatibility. If one partner is honest and the other fudges the truth a good bit, if one partner is responsible with commitments and the other one breaks them regularly, if one partner is serious about monogamy and being faithful to their spouse for the duration of the marriage and the other just doesn't think sexual purity is all that important, these are not minor issues, folks. These are major issues. They're huge. So there's that. Now here's how I want to end the service, with a little encouragement. And don't talk trash about me on social media for doing what I did to that little girl. I was upgrading from a little girl to a woman. So, I mean, who wouldn't do that? I'm trying to end this sermon. If y'all just let me, I'll get out of this mess that I've created. Here's how I want to end this service. I want to do something that'll be encouraging, I hope, to people in the room and all those folks watching online. First of all, if you have been married for 10 years or less, would you stand to your feet right now, even if your spouse isn't here? 10 years or less, okay? Okay, look around, everybody. That's a pretty good group of people. Keep standing, if you will. Here's what I want to say to you guys. You're in the most vulnerable era, statistically, of your marriage. Most marriages, if they're going to break up, this is when it happens, during this season, this span, this first 10 years. If you really want to look at the hard dates, they're years 5, 6, and 7, according to statistics. And I want to say to you, be careful and guard your relationship like nobody's business. You're still setting patterns. Don't get careless. Don't be neglectful. You need to, I counsel couples and I try to help them identify their 5 most important emotional needs of their spouse so that they can focus on those 5 most important emotional needs and spend the rest of their life trying to work that out. And at the wedding, I generally laminate those cards, and whatever her 5 emotional needs were, I hand it to the guy as part of the ceremony. And whatever his were, I hand it to the girl, and they'll slip them in their pockets, And I'll say, in about every 5 years, you need to go back and reassess. You need to be working on your relationship like crazy, doing everything you can to meet the needs of your spouse. Identify what those are and spend a lot of time meeting those needs. Find ways that you can build into this relationship and deepen your commitment and make it more mutually satisfying, because it'll serve you well for the rest of your married life. But be careful. Thank you for standing. I love you guys. You can be seated. Let's give them a good hand. Hey, great start. Those of you who have been married between 10 and 20 years, would you stand to your feet? Did you notice they got up a little bit slower than... Yeah. Here's what I want to say to you. Realize something for just a second. You've shared probably about half your adult life with your partner. You've already kind of beaten the statistical odds against you. Statistically, if you're 10 to 20 years along, you're in a safer territory. You've probably weathered some storms, and you've got a good foundation that you're building upon or have built upon. Build it, friends. This is not any time to retreat. This is time to say, let's go forward. The best is yet to come. So build it, but be careful that you don't get lazy about it. Invest in it. Don't give up just because you've gotten past the hump. Always put your time in and work at it. Work at it. Be careful. I love you guys. You can be seated. Give them a good hand. For those of you who have been married between 20 and 30 years, any in the house, would you stand? 20 and 30 years. Wow, okay. They're hobbling to their feet, but they're getting up. Yeah. These people, they deserve the applause that you gave them. This ought to be the payoff years, okay? Especially if you're at the mid to upper end of this time frame. It's not going to be that many years from now, if it hasn't already happened, that the kids are going to start getting more independent, and they're going to start going away. Pretty soon you're sitting across the table from each other, and you're saying, it's just us again, right? I congratulate you. I congratulate you. Yeah, we partied like there wasn't no tomorrow, too. But I congratulate you for staying faithful to each other. You're an incredible example of lasting love. I love you guys. Thank you for the example you set. You can be seated. Thank you so much. Let's give them a good cheer. So now everybody that's still left in the room that's been married for 30 years or longer, would you stand to your feet? Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Shout some numbers out to me. 42. Nice. How many? 43? 30? Nice. What? Same day. Man, you guys are superstars. Stay standing, if you will. That's great. Phenomenal job. Sylvia and I are in this group, and I want to say something very serious to you guys. You folks play a more pivotal, important role in this church and society than you can possibly imagine. Amen. Because you're proving to the whole younger generation that this can be done. This can happen. You can build a love that lasts a lifetime. You can make a commitment at a marriage altar, and with the help of God and a lot of hard work, you can sustain that commitment for more than 30 years. You're proving in a culture that doesn't really stick with its commitments very much at all anymore, that by staying together and still being in love and loving toward one another, you're proving that this can be done, and it can be done at a very high level. We need examples like you. You inspire us. So thank you for what you represent. I love you guys. You can be seated. Now I'd like for all the singles in the room to stand from age 12 and up. If you're single, if you're widowed, if you're college age, divorced, whatever has brought you to the place of your singleness, okay? And I'm asking you to stand because this is how I'm going to close this service, praying for you, and our team is coming up while I pray for you guys. I am for you. I'm not against you. And I know I sound like an old school preacher up here teaching the principles that I've just shared with you, but I'm going to tell you this. If you'll go back and listen again, I should have done sermon notes today. I apologize. But if you'll go back and listen again, take some good notes. And think on it. Don't dismiss anything that you don't like because there's a little tension in some of these things, not dating somebody that's not a believer, all that kind of stuff. I know how it is. I mean, I get it. But if you'll pray on it as you grow and mature spiritually and just consider the things that I've taught you, I promise you this. If you will choose relationships wisely, if you won't get mad at God when somebody all of a sudden breaks up with you, you know, my life is not worth living anymore, or I can't believe it, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life. Bull crap. You're not. You've got to understand that God has a better plan for your life. He said no because he had a better yes. Wait on the Lord. Don't push this. Don't rush it. Just wait on the Lord. Don't compromise God's will for your life by getting hung up on something. God is, if you're a child of the King, he's navigating the circumstances of your life. Trust God. Now, here's what I know. Some of you standing up, you're done. You don't want nobody, okay? God didn't wire all of us to be with somebody. I get that. But some of you are anxiously looking for a relationship that will bring glory and honor to God. And I want to pray for you guys right here, right now. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? Father, I thank you for all the singles that are standing in the room and those that are watching online. There's some people that have a heart for God, and Lord, they're here trying to learn and grow in their faith spiritually. Would you help them today, God, to become the people that you've wanted them to be, that they not get impatient, that they, Lord, sometimes they'll go through a breakup and it just wrecks their life and their heart. But Father, in just a short period of time, could you help them to process this thing and realize that as children of the Most High God, just like I wanted the best for my daughter and I wasn't willing to compromise the best for her, you're not going to compromise the best for your children either. You've got a better yes. You've got a better yes. And help us, Father, to remember that, Lord, and to trust you, God, when you're moving things around in our life, that your plan is greater than anything we could possibly imagine. Help us to not take breakups so harshly. Yeah, there's a day or two, Lord, that we need to be, given opportunity to grieve and be sad. But God, we've got to begin looking to the future, because our future is so much brighter than our past when you're navigating our lives. So, Lord, I pray for your blessing. Lord, you've already got somebody out there for those that are looking for the right person. They're single, they're sexy, they're searching. Help them to find the person that you've ordained for them to be with, Lord, so that they can live a life of honor for you. But give them patience in the process, and we'll give you the praise, the honor, the glory for it all in Jesus' name. Will everybody...